The restaurant door slammed open so hard it rattled the glass windows. Cold rain blew in with the wind as an old man stepped inside, his soaked jacket clinging to his thin shoulders. Mud from his boots smeared across the polished floor. Conversations around the room slowed, then stopped completely. The manager behind the counter frowned the moment he saw him. "Hey," he barked loudly. "You can't come in here looking like that." The old man removed his faded military cap and held it against his chest. His voice was quiet. "Son, I'm sorry. I just need a place to sit for a few minutes." A few customers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Others stared openly at the stranger. His beard was gray and untrimmed. His jacket looked decades old. Hanging from the chest pocket was a small medal that most people in the room didn't even notice. The manager walked closer, his voice rising so everyone could hear. "This isn't a shelter. If you want handouts, go somewhere else." The old man swallowed and nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for a handout. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I just thought maybe I could buy some bread." He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 crumpled dollar bills. The manager laughed loudly. "You think $2 buys food here?" A couple of customers snickered. The old man kept his head down. "If it's not enough, I understand." The manager suddenly slapped the money from his hand. The bills fluttered to the floor. "I said get out." The restaurant went silent. If you enjoy powerful stories like this, subscribe, comment, and hit the like button. What happened next will shock you. The old man slowly bent down to pick up the money, his fingers trembling as he reached for it. That's when a chair scraped violently across the floor. "Wait." A woman stood up from the far corner of the restaurant. Every head turned. She walked toward the old man quickly, her eyes fixed on the small metal pin to his jacket. Her voice shook. "Sir, where did you get that medal?" The old man looked confused. "This?" he asked quietly. The manager scoffed. "Oh, please. You can buy those online. Don't start making up stories." But the woman stepped closer, her eyes filling with disbelief. "No, that's not a fake." She turned to the manager, anger flashing across her face. "That's a silver star." The room went completely quiet. The manager rolled his eyes. "So what?" The woman stared at the old man again. "Sir, did you serve in the 3rd Infantry Division?" The old man hesitated for a moment. Then he nodded. A murmur spread across the restaurant. The woman pulled out her phone, typing quickly. Her hands began shaking as she scrolled through something on the screen. Then she gasped. "Oh my God!" A man sitting nearby leaned over. "What is it?" She turned the phone toward him. On the screen was an old military photograph. A younger version of the same man stood in a battlefield, carrying an injured soldier on his back, while explosions burned in the background. Under the image were the words, "Captain Walter Hayes, awarded the Silver Star for rescuing multiple soldiers under enemy fire." The man beside her stared in disbelief. "That's him." Several customers stood up, crowding closer. The woman slowly looked back at the old man. Are you Captain Walter Hayes?" The old man sighed softly. "I used to be." The entire restaurant went silent. The manager suddenly looked less confident. "Well, even if he was, that doesn't mean." The woman cut him off. "Do you even understand what that medal means?" The manager folded his arms defensively. "It means he fought in a war. Lots of people did." The woman's voice broke slightly. "My father fought in that war." The old man looked up. "Your father?" She nodded slowly. "He used to tell me about a captain who saved his life." Her breathing grew heavier. "He said that captain carried him across a battlefield after he was shot." The old man stared at her face carefully now. "What was your father's name?" "Michael Brooks." The old man froze. For several seconds he didn't speak. Then he slowly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an old photograph. He handed it to her. "Is this him?" Her hands began shaking as she took the picture. It showed 2 soldiers standing side by side in dusty uniforms. One of them was the younger version of Walter. The other was a smiling young man with dark skin and bright eyes. Tears filled her eyes instantly. "That's my dad." Her voice cracked. "That's my dad." The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence. The woman wiped her tears quickly. "My dad used to tell that story every year on Veterans Day," she said softly. "He always said a man named Walter saved his life." The old man looked down at the floor. "He was a good soldier." The woman stepped forward and hugged him suddenly. "You saved my father," she whispered. For the first time since he entered the restaurant, Walter looked overwhelmed. The manager cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, that's touching and all, but he still can't." The woman turned toward him sharply. Don't say another word. The manager hesitated. You humiliated a man who risked his life for this country. Walter gently touched her shoulder. It's all right, he said quietly. No, she replied firmly. It's not all right. A man at another table suddenly spoke up. Hold on. I recognize that name. He grabbed his phone and searched quickly. More images appeared. More records. More proof. Customers began whispering to each other. That really is him. I remember reading about this battle. That man saved an entire unit. The manager's confidence started fading. Walter slowly picked up the $2 from the floor. I didn't mean to cause trouble, he said softly. The woman shook her head. You didn't. She looked at him carefully. Why did you come here tonight? Walter hesitated before answering. I was looking for someone. The woman frowned. Who? Walter handed her the photograph again. I was hoping to find Michael Brooks. I heard he used to live near this area. Her expression softened with sadness. My father passed away 3 years ago. Walter closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry to hear that. He never stopped talking about you, she added quietly. The restaurant door suddenly opened again. 2 men in military uniforms stepped inside. They scanned the room quickly. Then one of them spotted Walter. Both men walked straight toward him. The entire restaurant watched. When they reached him, they both stood tall and raised their hands in a crisp salute. Captain Hayes, one of them said respectfully. Walter looked surprised. Gentlemen. The officer lowered his salute. We've been trying to find you. The room filled with whispers again. The officer looked around the restaurant. Everyone here should know that this man saved 12 soldiers during one of the most dangerous missions of the war. The crowd stared at Walter with new respect. The manager's face had turned pale. Walter shifted uncomfortably. I didn't do anything special, he said quietly. You ran through enemy fire 6 times, the officer replied. The woman beside him wiped another tear. My father always said you were the bravest man he ever met. The officer suddenly turned toward the manager. Is there a problem here? The manager swallowed hard. No, sir. Walter looked at the manager calmly. You didn't know who I was, he said gently. Then he added something that made the entire room fall silent. But you didn't need to know who I was to treat me like a human being. The manager lowered his eyes. The restaurant door opened again as several more customers walked in, unaware of the moment that had just changed everything. Walter finally sat down at a table. The woman pulled out a chair across from him. My name is Danielle, she said softly. Walter nodded. It's nice to finally meet you, Danielle. She smiled through tears. You're not eating alone tonight. And if this story is already touching your heart, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because stories like this remind us that sometimes the people the world overlooks are the very heroes who once stood between us and danger. Walter looked around the restaurant one more time. Just an hour ago, he had walked in as a stranger. Now every person in the room was watching him with respect. But the night was far from over, and none of them yet knew that the biggest revelation of the evening was still waiting to unfold. The recording of the restaurant incident had been quietly captured by one of the customers. Within hours, the video had spread across social media. People everywhere watched in shock as a decorated war hero, Captain Walter Hayes, had been treated like a nobody, dragged across the floor for a few crumpled dollars. Comments poured in, thousands of messages expressing outrage and admiration alike. For the first time in years, Walter's story was being told, not as a headline of war, but as a story of injustice, heroism, and humanity. Danielle refused to let Walter disappear back into obscurity. She called friends from the veteran community, reached out to organizations, and arranged temporary housing for him. Volunteers arrived at the restaurant, helping him gather his belongings. For the first time in decades, Walter had someone watching over him, someone who truly cared. He looked at Danielle, eyes glistening with tears. I'm not used to this, he admitted. It's been so long since anyone really cared. She squeezed his hand. Then let's make sure it never happens again. News outlets began contacting her, wanting interviews. Walter politely declined. Fame was not what he sought. He had carried men to safety, risked his life countless times, and yet here he was, still humble, still quiet, still the same man. He didn't want applause, but he did want people to understand that heroism often went unseen. As he walked through the doors of his new temporary apartment, the weight he had carried for decades seemed to lift slightly, though the memories of lost friends and fallen soldiers still lingered. Meanwhile, The restaurant manager couldn't sleep for days. Every time he closed his eyes, he replayed the scene. The laughter, the mockery, the metal glinting in the dim light. His shame grew heavier with every passing hour. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he sought Walter out. Kneeling before him, voice trembling, he said, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea who you were. I can't believe I treated you like that." Walter looked down at him and nodded slowly. "Son, it's all right. What matters is that you learned from it." That single interaction changed the manager. In the following months, he made it his mission to help struggling veterans, offering free meals and kindness to anyone in need. Walter's life began to change gradually. With Danielle's support and the outreach of veteran organizations, he secured a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Medical care for his injuries, both physical and emotional, became available to him for the first time in years. Though he rarely spoke of his past, his presence in the community became a quiet inspiration. Neighbors who knew nothing of his history saw a humble man who treated everyone with respect and kindness. Danielle frequently visited, sitting with him over warm meals, helping him adjust to a life no longer defined by invisibility and grief. Months later, Walter returned to the same restaurant where the events had unfolded. The atmosphere was entirely different. The manager approached him with a respectful nod and a warm smile. A small plaque hung near the entrance, in honor of Captain Walter Hayes, a hero who reminded us that respect should never depend on appearance. Walter paused, looking at the plaque. His eyes softened, but the smile on his face was quiet, unassuming. He did not seek recognition, yet it had found him. For the first time in decades, he felt seen, not just as a veteran, but as a man whose life mattered. The story of Walter Hayes carried a lesson far beyond the restaurant. Heroes did not always look like heroes. Sometimes they were the people the world overlooked, forgotten, or even mocked. And sometimes it took one brave act of recognition, one display of kindness, to remind the world of their true worth. Danielle, the manager, the customers, and millions online learned that appearances could be deceiving, and that every person deserved respect, regardless of circumstance. If this story is moving you, remember to click the like button, subscribe, and comment below. Share your thoughts, and let the world know that heroes like Walter deserve to be remembered.